That's what I want to get into today. The main thing, which is I want to talk about the New Kingdom period, which the New Kingdom, I'll get to it later, has three dominant dynasties that are part of it later. The 18th, the 19th, and the 20th dynasties. It kind of comes at the end of the Bronze Age, the late Bronze Age. And they think that the New Kingdom emerged because of a threat where Egypt got invaded. They had these peoples that were called the Hyksos that invaded Egypt around the 17th century. You got to see an image of that on the right with, I guess, the Hyksos coming in. And they do think it kind of, in the 1600s, they theorized that these peoples came out of what is basically the Levant. I think there's a theory that the Hyksos were some kind of Asiatic peoples that came from like where Canaan is, which would be like where Israel and maybe Lebanon is. They might be similar to the Israelites. It's kind of debated how they're related. Some people think they may have been related to them, but they're not sure if that's true or not from different sources a long time ago. What we do know is that they have different sources that write about the Hyksos. The main source that's important is Manetho. Who was Manetho? Manetho was this kind of like a Greco-Egyptian priest who was an historian that lived about the 3rd century BC. He lived under the Ptolemaic dynasty, maybe under King Ptolemy I, who was one of the first rulers of that kingdom that reigned over Egypt, who were related back to the Macedonians and after Alexander had conquered Egypt. And he was the main source. He wrote a book called History of Egypt, or if you want the Greek version, it's Egyptica. I think it's how they say it in the Greek. And the only thing about his work is that it's now in fragments through Flavius Josephus, who was a Roman Jewish writer that lived about 2,000 years ago in the late 1st century AD. And so he's our main source on it. And they say Josephus is the one that kind of tried to connect maybe the idea of the Hyksos being related to the Israelites, but they're not sure if that's true or not. What we do know about the Hyksos, they introduced a lot of things to Egypt, like the horse and chariot were brought in, which you see in that image on the right. So they brought that in from, I guess, Mesopotamia to the east, where probably they started fighting with horses and chariots. Sickle sword, which they had in Mesopotamia, and probably the Hittites had it also as well. And the composite bow was also something they also brought in. That totally changed warfare in Egypt. And it allowed them to take control of the northern part of Egypt, what we call Lower Egypt, but they never conquered the southern part or Upper Egypt. Actually had a capital at Avaris. That was their capital, where they reigned from. Now, I think there's stories where I think they say that a lot of them had like their own dynasties and pharaohs, but they had a chief god they worshiped, which was the god Set, which was like a desert god. It was kind of interesting that these were maybe desert peoples at one point that came in and just seized control of Egypt. But they're not considered native Egyptians, at least they think. They're kind of seen as foreigners. And according to Manetho, he was the writer on it. He said that the word Hyksos meant something like rulers of foreign lands. That's kind of what it meant. Or some people say foreign kings or something like that is the translation of it. So anyway, that's kind of talking about the Hyksos and who they of course were.